first time, as an outsider, you might think the Germans have gone crazy overnight. Wild figures in frightening wooden masks run through the streets, swinging swipes and drawing viewers into the chaos. But this video is not about cliches. Instead, we take a closer look at where this tradition really comes from and how it actually works. The video is divided into three parts: a short introduction, the history of Swabian-Alemannic Carnival, the traditional carnival schedule. At the end, I will also list my sources and references. A few words about me. I study history and I grew up with Swabian-Alemannic Carnival. It has been part of my life since childhood. But why I emphasize Swabian-Alemannic Carnival every time? Quite simply, Carnival is a pan-European phenomenon. It exists in many countries. Venice is probably the most famous example. In Germany, however, two very different carnival traditions developed. On the one hand, there is Rhineland Carnival, celebrated mainly in western Germany, with Cologne, Düsseldorf and Mainz as its strongholds. On the other hand, there is Swabian-Alemannic Carnival, which is celebrated primarily in Baden-Württemberg, eastern Switzerland and parts of western Bavaria. To understand why the German traditions are so different, we need to look at history. If you ask people in Baden-Württemberg where Carnival comes from, many will tell you that it goes back to the ancient Germanic tribes and was meant to drive away winter. The story, however, is not true. It is a relict of Nazi-era propaganda. The Swabian-Alemannic Carnival, as we know it today, has its roots in the Middle Ages. Let's start with the German word Fastnacht. It consists of Fasten, to fast, and Nacht, night, and originally referent to the night before the fast, meaning the night before Ash Wednesday. Carnival is therefore a threshold festival, a transition between everyday life and the strict fasting period of Lent. This meaning is also reflected in the Romance word carnival, which comes from the Church Latin canis levamen, meaning removal of meat. Lent represented a radical break in the medieval economic year. During the 6 weeks between Ash Wednesday and Easter, the consumption of meat from warm-blooded animals was prohibited, as well as all other food derived from livestock and poultry farm. This included lard, fat, milk, butter, cheese, and eggs. In the day leading up to the Lent, farm animals were killed and large quantities of meat were consumed. Since the 13th century, their feasts have been held in public. These feasts were held to use up all perishable supplies that were subject to fasting rules. During this time, traditional carnival cakes were made to use up leftovers. These cakes contain a lot of eggs and are baked in lard. They were given away in baking processions. Chickens posed a special problem, since they continued to lay eggs during Lent. Many were killed beforehand. Carnival was also traditionally an interest day. Many farmers delivered carnival chickens to the lord of the manor. This is noted, for example, in a deed of donation from Rottweil in 1310. Zwei Fastnachtshühnere, two carnival chickens. In the cities, other elements were soon added to the originally purely economic forms of carnival celebration, eating and drinking together. An important early development was the combination of music and dance. During the Middle Ages and the early modern period, special permission from the authorities was required for dances. During Lent, people also had to abstain from sexual activities, which is why Carnival was one of the most popular times for weddings. During the 14th and 15th century, carnival activities grew in popularity, particularly in urban areas. Around the time of Carnival, games and performances became increasingly common, primarily performed by unmarried craftsmen. As the modern era dawned, the demonstrative nature of these customs became increasingly prominent. Organized performances emerged. Urban parades were particularly popular and served as mean of civic self-presentation. They could culminate in major events such as the Schwimmbadlauf in Nuremberg. Finally, people enjoyed staging theatrical performances known as Fastnachtsspiele. By 1500, the carnival celebrations were highly coordinated. Despite the ever-increasing production value, the primary economic function of carnival remained recognizable. Carnival offered the last opportunity to eat and drink excessively, especially meat, before the start of the fasting period. The increasingly elaborate carnival celebration, especially in the cities, also presented a challenge to the magistrates. They had to ensure that they did not lose control amid the general rivalry. However, they acted skillfully, responding to the exuberant celebrations by allowing everyone to enjoy themselves while precisely defining the limits of this enjoyment in the annual carnival regulation. As long as participants observed these regulations, there were no problems. Those responsible for relation to the breaches of agreement, mischief, brawls, rudeness, insults, or continued celebrations into Ash Wednesday were substantially held accountable and subjected to serve fines or prison sentences. While Gregory representatives in the 13th and 14th century passed fairly moderate judgment on Carnival. This changed fundamentally in the 15th century. Around 1400, the Church began to interpret Carnival in a way that gradually demonized it. This concept gradually took its shape in the history of ideas. In sermons, Carnival was denounced as a world ruled by the devil, and Lent was prized as a well-ordered, God-blessing cosmos of salvation. All this impact and the experience of the festival complex itself. For example, this can be seen in the costumes and masks worn during the carnival celebration. Early on, the actors began walking around in costume and even disguised beyond recognition. On the eve of Lent, according to the limited evidence, the masks were initially relatively arbitrary, but increasingly took on a very specific character over time. Namely, the almost exclusively depicted negative figures. Sources most frankly mention the devil as a recurring figure during this period, who rarely appeared alone, but rather in hordes. The Nuremberg Schwimmbad books are our main sources of pictures. In addition to devils and creatures from hell, Other types of mask appeared in the late medieval carnival masquerades. Examples include the wild man, animal costumes, and the fool. From the second half of the 15th century onwards, urban carnival celebrations became more and more elaborate. Costumes and masks were early defined and had to feature characteristics borrowed from the visual arts. The participants were required to wear face masks, which were designed on ensure total concealment. This still is a defining feature of Swabian-Alemannic Carnival celebration today. An excavation in Ulm in 1919 solved the mystery of the material composition of masks used at that time. To everyone's surprise, they were made of clay and not as they of wood. This also explains why no masks have been preserved. They were used until they broke and then thrown away. Over the course of the 17th century, Carnival changed character from the Italian commedia dell'arte gradually mixed with the traditional characters. During the Baroque period, the forms of Carnival changed, as did its political and religious framework. This led to a geographical division of customs into regions with intense carnival celebration and regions that later abandoned carnival altogether. This change was due to confessional development and the growing difference between Catholic and Protestant daily practice and lifestyles. After Martin Luther abolished Lent as a collective obligation, there was no longer any reason for carnival in reformed areas after the 1530s. However, even in Catholic areas, carnival was banned several times because participants had gone too far. Following Napoleon's significant changes to the geography of southwestern Germany, the two major territorial lords in Baden and Württemberg banned wild carnival celebrations entirely. However, this did not stop some people from doing their old costumes and celebrating carnival. If they were caught, they were fined or imprisoned. It was during this time that the Tamer Rhineland Carnival emerged. Festive committees formed, and there were parades of carnival heroes and mask balls, all based on Roman models. During this period, a two-tiered society emerged during Carnival. The lower social class celebrated with wild and rowdy traditional carnival figures. The upper class attended sophisticated balls with elegant costumes and fashionable masks. The divergence between the Fastnacht in southwest Germany and the Rhinish Carnival began just before the start of the 20th century. It started in the late 1880s, progressed rapidly, and ultimately resulted in southwest Germany completely turning away from the Rhinish model. After decades of dominates by upper-class carnival customs, the common people in many cities resisted. They were tired of being bussed around, patronized, or excluded by the upper classes during the carnival season. Therefore, they dug out old carnival costumes preserved in boxes, chambers, and attics and returned to the traditional masquerade of the pre-Romanesque carnival, not refined by the educated middle class. Numerous carnival guilds were founded, and corresponding predecessor institutes were revived where they had existed. In practice, however, this process was very slow. Swabian-Alemannic Carnival experienced a resurgence, but it was abruptly interrupted by World War I. in which millions of people died. Daring celebrations seem absurd. Ernst Jünger described the war as Fastnacht der Hölle, Hell's Carnival. After the war ended, much of the population wanted to revive the tradition. However, shortly before Carnival 1919, the governments of Baden and Württemberg decided against it. They had ethical and safety concerns. All carnival activities were banned. An exception was granted for guilds with a proof historical background in 1921. However, they were banned again in 1923 during Germany's hyperinflation. In November 1924, representatives of 18 guilds met and established der Vereinigung Schwäbisch-Alemannischer Narrenzünfte, Association of Swabian-Alemannic Guilds. In 1928, they held their first event. All members met in Freiburg and Breisgau and organized a joint parade. Among other activities, these parades featured many different guilds and associations, are now an integral part of Carnival celebrations. Starting in 1943, the Nazi regime exploited Carnival for its own purpose. They declared Carnival to be a Germanic custom and used it for promote their racist beliefs. They forced the Association of Swabian-Alemannic Guilds to join the Bund Deutscher Carnival, German Carnival Association, and did not shy away from bringing Carnival into line. However, especially towards the end of the 1930s, there were repeated examples of courageous and daring criticism of the system during Carnival. During the 1939 Carnival in Weingarten, Upper Swabia, for example, someone appeared on the grandstand during the parade wearing a traditional costume and a wooden mask shaped like Adolf Hitler. They mimicked Hitler and disappeared unrecognized into the crowd. An immediate search failed to locate the person, and no one betrayed them. The mask remained lost for 70 years until they repeated in a neighboring village. To this day, the wearer remains unknown. Carnival was largely not celebrated during World War II. After the war ended, Allied powers banned all carnival activities. The French occupying force did not allow this tradition to resume until 1974. Carnival has banned or cancelled twice in the recent past, once in 1991 when the Second Gulf War broke out, and again 2021 due to the coronavirus pandemic. The Swabian-Alemannic Carnival has been recognized as an intentional cultural heritage since 2014.
Carnival schedule.
Each town has its own carnival schedule. Below are some explanation of important dates. It is also important to note that Carnival does not take place on the specific day like Christmas, since it is based on Easter. The date varies each year. Recently, however, a number of clubs have started celebrating Fastnacht on St. Martin's Day, a tradition adopted from Rhineland Carnival. Traditionally, Swabian-Alemannic Fastnacht does not begin until January 6th, the Fest of Epiphany. There are many different customs surrounding the start of Carnival. In some places, such as Rottweil, men dressed in the tailcoats and top hats come out and dust off masks and costumes. In other places, Carnival is announced with loud noises. For example, in Überlingen and Weingarten, it announced with church bells and pipes. In Siebengen, Switzerland, Carnival is welcomed by the Einscheller, who swing huge cube bells. But Carnival really begins on the last fourth day before Lent. This day has many names, such as Schmutziger Donnerstag, Schmutziger Donnerstag, Glompiger Donnerstag. The words before fourth day usually means greasy. as this was the day when carnival pastries were traditionally baked. Every place has its own tradition. The day usually begins very early. A band marches through the streets and wakes up the residents. In some places, they use noisy instruments such as pots and pans. During the day, the fools release the pupils from the school. In some places, they tie up the teachers, giving the pupils the next few days off. As the day progresses, the town hall is stormed and the mayor is deposed. The mayor often hands over the symbolic key to the town hall. The fools then take over. In some places, a fool's tree is erected to symbolize the fool's region. In the evening, there is also a Hemdklunker parade on Lake Constance and Upper Rhine. Everyone wears white nightshirts and nightcaps and make noise. On Friday, the foolish activities are subsided considerably or decreased altogether, out of respect of Jesus' death on the cross. This day was strictly excluded from carnival celebration. On Carnival Saturday, parades take place in some places. For a long time, there were no carnival activities on Carnival Sunday, just as there were none on Friday. Only recently have many parades begun to take place on this day. Often a fool's mass is held in church beforehand. Another highlight is Carnival Monday, also known as Rose Monday or Fastnachtsmontag. In the Rhine, many large traditional parades take place on this day. In Rothweil, for example, the parade begins at 8 o'clock in the morning. On Tuesday, the third and last main day of Carnival, some cities repeat the highlights of the previous day in the same or slightly modified form. In many places, Tuesday evening is marked by farewells or mourning. In Endingen am Kaiserstuhl, for example, the dead main character of the carnival is lowered into a well after a funeral procession, where he rests until the next carnival. In Villingen, in the Black Forest, it is traditional for the Wurst, a full character who runs around wearing straw-stuffed pants, to burn their straw. In Bad Säckingen, the so-called Hühlerumzug forms. Figures dressed in white with their face painted black and white run around the city loudly lamenting with torches and burn a straw figure at the end. Lent begins on Ash Wednesday with a visit to church. In some places, people wash out their wallets on Wednesday. In other places, people cut down the fool's tree and burn a straw doll as symbol of carnival. In some places, carnival only begins now. This stems from an old disagreement about how to correctly calculate Lent. This carnival is also called Farmers' Carnival, Fastnacht. In Basel, Switzerland, for instance, Carnival starts on the Monday after Ash Wednesday with the Morgenstreich. At precisely 4 a.m., the city lights are turned off and numerous pipers and drummers carrying elaborate lanterns on their heads and run through the streets. There are also large lanterns representing a specific theme. The Swabian-Alemannic Carnival is therefore much more than just a bunch of crazy Germans breaking out their strict rules for a few days. What many may seem like pure unstructured chaos to outsiders at first glance is in fact a deeply rooted structured cultural heritage. In its a fascinating mixture of century-old history, Christian tradition, and a healthy dose of local pride. Behind every mask and every costume is not just a discune, but a living piece of identity that has been passed down from generation to generation. So, if you ever have the chance to be in southwestern Germany or Switzerland in February or March, mingle with the locals. I hope you enjoyed this insight into my native culture, and that it showed you that there is much more to the colorful festival than meet the eyes. As promised, here are my sources and reference. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.